recall the sound of my own teeth slamming against the floor. My faultless technique, my years of practice, and only if it mattered in that moment. One mistake, one moment of pride, and I'd learnt the most dreadful reality about combat. Your greatest foe is not the person standing in front of you. It is the person looking back at you in the mirror, the one who knows every move you're about to make, the one who can defeat you with just one thought. Do you know who I'm talking about? That voice in your head right now telling you that you aren't good enough, ready enough, or strong enough. That is your opponent. That's who I'll educate you to defeat. Listen closely, because what I'm about to say isn't merely about battling. It's about the fight that has been waging within you every day of your life a war, that most people are unaware they are losing. But I assure you, this reality is like looking into the sun. It is impossible to unsee once you have seen it. Are you ready to fight your toughest adversary? When I initially started my school in Oakland, a dilemma came that would affect my life forever. However, the obstacle was not what you might anticipate. It wasn't the local masters that questioned my methods, although they did. It wasn't even the cultural contrasts I encountered as a Chinese man instructing Americans. No, the real problem came one night after hours of training. I was practicing my techniques at a high rate and with increasing difficulty. Every punch and kick is flawless. Then I glanced in the mirror and saw myself clearly for the first time. Behind all that speed and intensity, I saw something that stopped me cold. Dread, fear of not being good enough, fear of disappointing those who believed in me, fear of my own limitations. Do you feel it too? The persistent urge to prove yourself at work, in relationships, and in every mirror you pass. Society tells you to be stronger, faster, and better. However, in seeking what you believe you should be, you have forgotten who you are. I spent hundreds of hours working on my body, but that night in front of the mirror taught me something no amount of physical training could. The deadliest hits come not from your opponents, but from the uncertainty you keep within. When you enter into a meeting, your employer does not defeat you. It is your own hesitation. When you want to take a risk, it's not external hurdles that keep you back. It's the mental limits you've set on yourself. Allow me to tell you about the 3 most dangerous opponents you will ever meet. I didn't discover them in a training hall or a street battle. I found them in times of silence, in the gap between thoughts, and in the reflection of my own truth. The first is the perfectionist, the most crippling of all enemies. I recall spending several hours practicing a single movement, believing that absolute perfection was the only option. But this opponent is astute. It does not harm you directly, but instead freezes you in place. It makes you so terrified of flaws that you never completely express yourself. How many dreams have you shattered before they even began because you couldn't promise perfection? The second opponent is the doubter. When I initially arrived in Hollywood, every door seems to close. Too Asian for the lead role, they said. Audiences aren't ready, they explained. The biggest voice stating you can't didn't come from them, but from within. When you're on the verge of attaining accomplishment, the doubter whispers. It dims your light just when you need to shine brightest. And the third, the most treacherous of all, the ego. People think ego signifies pride, but actual ego is far more nuanced. It's the voice that says you've learnt enough, the portion of you that chooses comfort over advancement, the belief that you are what you've attained. I see fighters all the time so proud of their style, their technique, their way trapped by their own vision of themselves. You know what I noticed in my training hall? Boards don't hit back, but your mind throws punches you never see coming. Every time you're poised to break through, it reminds you of past failures. Every time you're ready to take a risk, it shows you all the ways you could fail. I recall the precise time things changed in my training. I was training with my wooden dummy, throwing the same combos I'd thrown thousands of times before. Suddenly, I halted. In that moment of quiet, I realized I wasn't training to improve my technique anymore. I was training to silence these inner opponents. Each punch wasn't about hitting harder. It was about breaking through another layer of self-imposed constraint. The true conflict isn't out there in the world. The true fight is in those quiet moments when you're alone with yourself, when there's no one to impress, no one to compete with, no one to blame. That's when these three opponents come at you hardest. And that's exactly when you need to remember what I'm about to teach you. When I started Jeet Kune Do, people assumed I was just developing another combat style, but I wasn't interested in adding to the uncertainty. I was interested in stripping away and unveiling the truth that had always been there. And this truth applies much more forcefully to your inner fights. The first principle, employing no way as way. People are always searching for the perfect solution, the ultimate technique to fight their inner demons. They hop from one self-help book to another, one guru to the next. But listen carefully. The instant you commit to a particular approach, you become its prisoner. True freedom comes from remaining formless, malleable, flowing. Remember the iconic scene from Enter the Dragon, the art of fighting without fighting. Your inner fights don't always need to be faced head-on. Sometimes the greatest win comes from not interacting at all. When self-doubt attacks, don't wrestle with it. When fear strikes, don't strive to overpower it. Instead, divert that energy like guiding an opponent to an empty boat. Most people's inner work is all mechanical movement with rigid routines, forced positivity, rehearsed affirmations. But where is the emotional content? A punch without feeling is just motion through air. Your inner labor without genuine feeling is just going through the motions. Feel your struggles. Embrace your doubts. Only by admitting their presence can you transcend them. Let me tell you about the water principle. Water is the softest substance in the universe, yet it can permeate rock. Why? Because it doesn't fight itself. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is. When it reaches an impediment, it doesn't force its way through it. Flows around, under, over. Be like water in your inner struggle. Don't resist your thoughts and emotions. Flow with them. Understand them. Let them show you the path. This takes me to one of my most misunderstood techniques, the one-inch punch. People see the apparent display of authority, but they overlook the profound inner truth. The strength doesn't come from the inch of physical movement. It comes from perfect oneness of mind, body, and spirit. When you erase the inner conflict, when you overcome the war between who you are and who you think you should be, that's when true power arises. I once destroyed every mirror in my training room, not out of rage, but revelation. I realized I had been fighting my reflection and image, an illusion of who I felt I ought to be. The real battle isn't with the enemy you see in the mirror. The real conflict is with the assumptions that make you identify an opponent at all. Your power, your ultimate, irresistible power, isn't in overcoming yourself. It's in realizing there was never anything to overcome. The opponent you've been fighting is only a shadow, a reflection of your own limited notions. When you comprehend this, really understand this, that's when everything changes. That's when you become like water, formless, shapeless, able to adapt to any container life puts you in without losing your uniqueness. Now, let me share with you the practices that turned me from a young boy filled with wrath and passion into someone who could fully express himself. These aren't just techniques, they are weapons for your inner arsenal. But remember, a weapon is only as powerful as the truth behind it. First, the art of honest self-expression. Every morning, before I touch a training dummy or throw a single punch, I stand alone and ask myself, who are you really? Beneath all the titles, beneath all the expectations. Most people never dare to ask this question. They are too scared of the response. But true power starts with harsh honesty. Think about bamboo in a storm. The inflexible wood strives to remain unaffected and eventually breaks. But bamboo bends, adapts, moves with the wind and survives. Your mentality must be like bamboo. When challenges come, don't reply with inflexible attitudes and ingrained beliefs. Bend, adapt, learn. Let me teach you 4 specific tactics that I've never mentioned in an interview or displayed in a film. These are the true tools for inner combat. First, do a personal audit. Every night, I sit down with my journal and write 3 things. Not my accomplishments or aspirations, but my anxieties, hesitations, and times of weakness. Why? Because you cannot conquer what you do not acknowledge. Be brutally honest. Where have you held back today? When did you give up to your inner opponent? Do not pass judgment. Instead, watch. You collect intelligence by studying your opponent's movements. Second, practice water meditation. Find a peaceful spot, close your eyes, and envision yourself as water. Water does not try to be water, it simply is. When it meets a rock, it flows rather than struggles. When it's frozen, it doesn't resist, it adapts. When it's heated, it doesn't struggle, it evolves. Practice this for even 5 minutes, and you'll feel your inflexible thoughts beginning to disintegrate. Third, the progressive challenge system. Each day, find one small fear, one tiny limitation, and go directly into it. If standing up in meetings terrifies you, start by saying just one word. If physical exercise intimidates you, begin with one push-up. Remember my journey, I didn't start by smashing boards. I started by breaking habits own small win at a time. Finally, the empty cup practice. Every morning tell yourself, yesterday's achievements are yesterday's tale. Yesterday's restrictions are yesterday's falsehoods. Empty your cup fully. Pour out your assumptions about what you can and cannot do. Pour out your beliefs about who you are and aren't. Start each day as an empty vessel, ready to be filled with fresh possibilities. But here's the essential point. These activities are not about becoming someone new. They're about peeling away everything that isn't actually you. Like sculpting, we're not adding material, we're removing everything that obscures the masterpiece within. I'll tell you what I discovered in my deepest times of training. The ultimate practice isn't about adding extra approaches to your arsenal. It's about reducing the impediments that limit your natural expression. When water flows, it doesn't try to flow, it simply follows its essence. Your genuine power will come not from what you add to yourself, but from what you dare to let go. Remember, these practices are not endings, they are starts. They are not solutions, they are gates. Each one is an opportunity to go deeper into your own reality, to peel away another layer of self-imposed constraint. Use them not as rigid rules, but as recommendations for your own exploration. Because in the end, the greatest practice of all is the one that gets you closer to your actual self. Now, we come to the moment of truth. Everything I've disclosed with you, the recognition of your inner opponents, the principles of combat, the daily practices, they all lead to this ultimate test. But I must warn you, what I'm going to propose will challenge you in ways no physical task ever could. You see, all your life, you've been fighting the wrong battle. You've been trying for perfection, aiming to reach an unrealistic vision of oneself that does not exist. This image of perfection is not your ally, it is your jail. I spent years stuck by it, continuously pushing, striving, and never feeling good enough. But here's the reality that impacted everything for me. The ideal self is the greatest illusion. It's like striving to capture one's own shadow. The harder you chase it, the longer it runs. The ultimate breakthrough comes not from becoming flawless, but from overcoming the craving for perfection. Consider the self-defeating cycle you've been following. Wake up, condemn yourself, push harder, fall short, repeat. It's like a fighter who has memorized a losing combination and continues to deliver the same punches, expecting a different outcome. To break the rhythm, you must first notice it, then disturb it, and then transcend it totally. This is why I'm issuing you a challenge. For the next 7 days, you'll fight for the most crucial thing in your life, your genuine self. But this is not a war against yourself. It is a fight for yourself. Day 1, address your reflection without judgment. Just observe as if you were watching an opponent and not planning your attack. Day 2, identify when you are criticizing yourself and respond with understanding rather than resistance. Day 3, take one activity that your perfect self would think you are not prepared for. Day 4, break one propensity, one behavior that supports your idealized image over your genuine expression. Day 5, In every engagement, value true emotion over faultless execution. Day 6, actively do something imperfectly and enjoy the discomfort like an old friend. Day 7, confront your reflection again, not to evaluate, but to honor the warrior who had the guts to be honest. Remember that each day is not about reaching a new degree of achievement. It is about removing another layer of pretense. To uncover who you truly are, you must transcend the idea of who you believe you should be, just like a martial artist does to find their own way. This task is not about being stronger, but about becoming freer. It is not about adding more, but about letting go. It is not about being perfect. Rather, it is about being honest. Will you stumble? Of course. Will you experience resistance? Absolutely. But that isn't failure. It's feedback. Each hard situation is an opportunity to push deeper, not a hint to withdraw. The actual victory in this challenge does not occur on day 7. It happens in the middle, that split second when you choose truth over appearance, authenticity over approval, genuine emotion over immaculate performance. Return to the mirror that revealed your greatest opponent at the outset of our adventure. Look closely. What do you see? Not the opponent you feared, but the ally you never acknowledged. Not the enemy to be beaten, but the self yearning to be liberated. I spent my life mastering the art of combat, only to discover that the ultimate battle isn't waged with fists or feet. It's waged in those quiet times when you choose truth over comfort, development over safety, authenticity over acceptance. The secret I promised to share with you, here it is. Self-mastery isn't about conquering yourself. It's about being yourself. The actual you, not the one the world expects, not the one your anxieties have generated, but the one who exists in those rare moments when you forget to pretend. Like water, you have always had the ability to adapt, flow, and penetrate any obstruction. Your actual strength, like water, comes from flowing with what could be rather than battling what is. Let go of who you think you should be and become like water, my buddy. Remember that the greatest fight isn't one against your own limitations. It's the one you win just by having the courage to be yourself. Your opponents will disappear. Your doubts will evaporate. But your reality, the raw, pure, overwhelming truth of who you really are, will persist. Now go. The mirror awaits. But this time, don't look for someone to defeat. Prepare for the warrior within to emerge. Because the greatest success is not becoming flawless, but becoming real. Become water, my friend. Be yourself.